They thought he didn't have a penny, until he paid for 12 combines in cash and shut everyone up. This isn't just a story about money. It's about what we inherit, what we owe, and what we choose to build when everything has been taken from us. If you've ever felt counted out or misunderstood, stick around. You might see a piece of yourself in this. And if you do, hit that subscribe button, because we tell stories for people like you here. The bus wheezed to a stop, its brakes sighing like a man giving up on a long argument. I grabbed the worn strap of my duffel bag, the only thing I owned that wasn't a hand-me-down from the state, and stepped out into the biting November air. The town of Prairie Ridge didn't so much announce itself as apologize for its existence. A single main street, a blinking traffic light that seemed more for decoration than direction, and a row of storefronts with faded paint peeling like sunburnt skin. This was it. The place my life had apparently been leading to for 18 years without my knowledge. For the last 6 hours, I'd been a ghost in transit, watching the concrete towers of the city shrink in the dirty rear window, replaced by an endless, flat expanse of brown and gray. 2 days ago, on my 18th birthday, I wasn't given a cake or a party. I was given a cardboard box with my file in it, and a handshake from a social worker who had already forgotten my name. 18 meant freedom. It also meant I was officially no one's problem anymore. But then there was the letter. It had been waiting for me at the group home, forwarded from an address I didn't recognize. Thick, cream-colored paper, the kind people don't use anymore. It felt heavy, important. Inside, a man named Arthur Abernathy, attorney at law, informed me that I was the sole beneficiary of the estate of my late grandfather, Thomas Cutter. The letter was formal, dry, and contained a bus ticket and a simple instruction. Come to my office upon your arrival. I hadn't seen my grandfather since I was 6 years old. My parents died in a car crash when I was 5. I have only fractured memories of them, like stills from a movie I can't recall watching. For a year after, I lived with Grandpa Thomas on his farm. I remember the smell of dirt and diesel, the vastness of the sky, and the feeling of being very, very small. And then, one day, he was gone. A social worker came, a kind woman with sad eyes, and told me Grandpa couldn't take care of me anymore. I was taken to my first foster home. I spent the next 12 years believing he had abandoned me, that he'd looked at the broken little boy left on his doorstep and decided I was too much trouble. Now, this, an estate, a lawyer, a town I didn't know. It felt like a joke or a trap. The lawyer's office was easy to find. It was one of the few buildings on Main Street that looked like it was still in business, though just barely. The gold leaf lettering on the glass door was flaking off. A. Abernathy, attorney at law. I pushed the door open, a small bell tinkling overhead, a sound that seemed too cheerful for the place. The air inside was thick with the smell of old paper, leather, and something else, maybe pipe tobacco from a long time ago. A woman with a helmet of gray hair peered at me over her glasses. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she doubted it. "I'm here to see Mr. Abernathy. My name is Leo Cutter." Her expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition. Pity. She nodded toward a closed door. "He's expecting you." Arthur Abernathy was as old as his office. He was a tall, stooped man in a rumpled tweed jacket, with a face like a road map of every worry the county had ever had. He stood up slowly, extending a bony hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. "Leo, it's good to see you, son, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Please, sit." I sat in the worn leather chair opposite his desk. It groaned under my weight. The desk was a mountain range of files and books. He seemed to navigate it by memory. He cleared his throat, tapping a thick manila folder with my name on it. "Your grandfather, Thomas. He was a good man. A complicated man, but a good one." I said nothing. Good men don't abandon their grandsons. Abernathy seemed to read my mind. "I know what you're probably thinking, Leo, and I can't say I blame you. The official story is that he was declared an unfit guardian due to financial instability. That's what the state records show." "So he was broke," I said, my voice flat. It was the only explanation that made any sense. He couldn't afford to keep me. "He wasn't broke," Abernathy said quietly, his gaze steady. "Not in the way you mean, but he was under pressure, enormous pressure." He slid the folder across the desk. "This is the deed to the Cutter farm. 320 acres, the farmhouse, the barn, all the equipment. It's all in your name now." I stared at the folder, not moving to touch it. It felt like a bomb. "What's the catch?" "The catch," he said, leaning back with a sigh, "is a lien against the property for $247,000, held by Agricorp Development. They financed your grandfather's operating loans for the last 5 years. The final payment was due 60 days after his death. That deadline is tomorrow." My head swam. $247,000. It might as well have been $1 billion. I had $74 in my pocket. "So they take the farm," I said. It wasn't a question. "That's their plan," Abernathy confirmed. "They've been buying up family farms around here for a decade. They offer loans, the terms get tighter, a bad harvest happens, and they foreclose. They don't want the farm, Leo. They want the land. There are shale deposits under half this county." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "There's an offer on the table. Agricorp will buy the estate from you. They'll pay off the lien and give you $25,000, clear. You sign the papers, you walk away with enough for a fresh start somewhere else. A good start." $25,000. To me, that was a fortune. It was a car. It was an apartment. It was a life I couldn't even imagine. All I had to do was sell the legacy of a man who had thrown me away. It felt like a test, a cruel cosmic test. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked. "Why not just give me the papers to sign?" Abernathy looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something beyond the tired lawyer. I saw a friend, my grandfather's friend. Because Thomas made me promise. He made me promise that if this day ever came, I would give you the choice, the real choice. He said you were smarter than any of them gave you credit for. He said you had good instincts. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, ornate iron key. It was old, rusted in places. He left this for you. He said it opens a box in the study at the farmhouse. He told me to tell you to look at what's in the box before you decide anything. He pushed the key across the desk. It stopped next to the folder. The deed and the key. The problem and the mystery. "The Agricorp representative, a Mr. Davies, will be at my office tomorrow at noon to finalize the sale," Abernathy said. "You have until then to make your decision. My assistant, Clara, has the keys to the farmhouse and your grandfather's old truck. They're yours now, for better or worse." I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I picked up the folder and the iron key. Their weight in my hands felt immense, disproportionate to their size. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy." "Just Arthur, son," he said, a sad smile touching his lips. "Good luck." Clara handed me a ring of keys with a grim, tight-lipped efficiency. One for the house, one for the truck. The truck was a 20-year-old Ford, rust-colored and dented, parked behind the office. It smelled like my grandfather, oil, earth, and stale coffee. It took 3 tries to start, the engine turning over with a reluctant groan before catching with a roar that shook the cab. I didn't know where I was going, not really. I just followed the road out of town, heading west, the direction Arthur had pointed. The landscape was a watercolor painting left out in the rain, all bleeding browns and muted grays. Skeletons of cornstalks rattled in the wind. Empty farmhouses stared out with vacant, broken window eyes. Each one was a tombstone for a family that had lost its fight. I saw the AgriCorp signs everywhere. Stark green and white signs hammered into fence posts declaring ownership. It was a quiet, creeping invasion. After 10 miles, I saw a mailbox with the name Cutter hand-painted on the side, the letters faded and chipped. A gravel driveway snaked off the main road, disappearing into a stand of skeletal cottonwood trees. This was it. I turned the truck, the tires crunching over the gravel, and the past rose up to meet me. The farmhouse was a simple 2-story clapboard house that had once been white. Now it was the color of bone, the paint surrendering to decades of sun and snow. A wide porch sagged in the middle like a tired sigh. The barn next to it was a massive red giant, its roofline sharp against the bruised purple of the evening sky. It all felt vaguely familiar, like a dream you can't quite hold on to after you wake up. I parked the truck and just sat there for a minute, the engine ticking as it cooled. The silence was absolute. No sirens, no traffic, no shouting from the apartment next door. Just the whisper of the wind through the dry grass. It was the kind of quiet that feels loud. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my duffel bag and the folder, the iron key cold in my pocket. I walked up the creaking porch steps, found the right key on the ring, and fit it into the lock. The door swung open into darkness. I stepped inside and was hit by a wall of cold, stale air. It was the smell of a place that had been sealed up with its grief. I fumbled along the wall until my fingers found a light switch. It clicked, but nothing happened. The power was off. Of course it was. My phone had a flashlight. I switched it on, the beam cutting a nervous path through the gloom. I was in a living room. Furniture was draped in white sheets, silent, lumpy ghosts in the darkness. Dust motes danced in the beam of my light like tiny, frantic spirits. I moved through the house, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. A dining room with a long, sheet-covered table. A kitchen with faded floral wallpaper and appliances from another century. Everything was neat, tidy, but utterly lifeless. It wasn't a home. It was a museum of a life that had ended. I found the study at the back of the house. It was smaller than the other rooms, lined with bookshelves filled with books on engineering, agriculture, and history. A heavy oak desk sat in the center of the room, clean and bare except for a thick layer of dust. And there, on the floor beneath the desk, was a heavy, dark wood box bound with iron straps. It was exactly as Arthur had described. I knelt down, my heart starting to pound a little faster. The box was locked with a heavy, intricate lock. I took the iron key from my pocket. My hand was trembling slightly as I inserted it. It turned with a satisfying, deep-throated clunk. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, there was no money, no treasure. Just a stack of envelopes, tied together with a faded piece of twine. They were addressed to me. Leo. Just my name, written in a strong, slanted hand, my grandfather's handwriting. I sat on the floor of the dusty, silent study, the beam of my phone propped against a book, and I untied the twine. I picked up the first letter. It was dated a week after he sent me away. My hands shook as I unfolded the brittle paper. "My dearest Leo," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the worst has come to pass. I hope that you have grown into a good man. I have tried to watch you from a distance, through Arthur, but I know it is not the same. I know you must hate me. You have every right to. I want you to know the truth. They told you I was unfit, that I couldn't provide for you. That is a lie. The truth is, I sent you away to save you." The words blurred. I had to stop and wipe my eyes, angry at the tears. Save me? He had shattered my world. He had left me alone. "A few years before your parents died," the letter continued, "I got into business with a man named Robert Davies. We were partners. I was the engineer, he was the salesman. I designed a series of modifications for combine harvesters, a new threshing system that was more efficient than anything on the market. It was my life's work. We were going to change farming. But Davies was ambitious. He sold our designs, my designs, to a new agricultural conglomerate called Agricorp. He took a high-paying job with them and left me with nothing but debt from our shared startup loans. The same Robert Davies is now the VP of acquisitions for this entire region. He is the man who holds the note on this farm. He is the man who wants to see this land paved over. My blood ran cold. Davies. The man who was coming tomorrow to buy my signature. The man who had offered me $25,000 for my silence. It wasn't business. It was personal. It was a vendetta. He buried me in legal fees, the letter went on. He used Agricorp's power to systematically indebt me. When your parents were taken from us, you became my world. But you also became my vulnerability. Davies knew it. He threatened to use the courts to take you, claiming I was an unstable guardian because of the legal battles. He would have dragged you through the mud, put you in the system anyway, and made sure you had nothing. I couldn't let him use you as a weapon against me. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I preempted him. I let the state take you, making it look like I was giving up. It put you out of his reach. It was the only way I could protect you while I continued to fight him. Sending you away didn't feel like cutting off a limb. It felt like tearing out my own heart to make sure yours kept beating. Every day for 12 years, I have lived with that choice. My silence was your shield, Leo. My absence was your sanctuary. I dropped the letter, my whole body shaking. I wasn't abandoned. I was protected. The narrative of my life, the one I had built around the central pillar of my grandfather's betrayal, crumbled into dust. The emptiness I had carried for 12 years wasn't emptiness. It was a space he had cleared for me, a firewall he had built with his own heart. I cried, not quiet tears, but deep, ragged sobs that tore up from my gut. I cried for the 6-year-old boy who thought he was worthless. I cried for the teenager who built walls around himself so no one could ever leave him again. And I cried for the old man who had died alone in this cold, silent house, fighting a war no one knew he was waging. This farm wasn't just a piece of land. It was a battlefield, It was the last standing outpost of a war I had just been drafted into. The $25,000 Agricorp was offering wasn't a fresh start. It was blood money. It was the price of his surrender, a final insult to my grandfather's memory. I sat there on that floor for what felt like hours, the cold seeping into my bones, until the tears ran dry. There was a stack of letters left. I picked up the next one. Its tone was different, less emotional, more practical. It was a battle plan. "Leo, grief is a luxury we don't have time for," it began, as if he knew exactly what I'd just been through. "Arthur will tell you about the debt. Davies is counting on you being a scared kid who will take the money and run. He is underestimating you. He is underestimating me. For the last 12 years I have not been idle. I fought them in the courts and lost. So I started fighting them in the one place I knew better than their lawyers, the workshop. I kept inventing, I kept building, and I kept records of everything." The letter went on to describe in meticulous detail a series of patents he had filed internationally, under a holding company registered in another country. He had reverse-engineered Agricorp's own technology and found that Davies had not only stolen his first designs, but had continued to incorporate his patented concepts into their new lines of equipment for years. He had been building a massive patent infringement case against them. "The proof is in the barn," the letter stated, "but the barn is where they will look first if they get suspicious. I'm not that simple. Look under the hearth in the living room. There's a loose stone. What you need is under there." My mind was racing. This was insane. It was a spy movie plot unfolding in a dusty farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. I took my phone and went back to the living room. The fireplace was a huge structure of river stones. I ran my light over the hearth. One of the flat gray stones in front of the fireplace looked slightly different, its mortar line thinner than the others. I got my fingers around the edge and pulled. It was heavy, but it lifted out. Beneath it was a small, dark cavity, and inside that cavity was a small steel lockbox. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. It was filled with USB drives, stacks of documents held with rubber bands, and a ledger book. And on top of it all was another envelope, the final letter. I took the box back to the study and sat down, my adrenaline singing. I opened the last letter. "Son, if you've found this, you have everything you need to destroy Robert Davies and cause a world of trouble for Agricorp. The evidence in this box is enough to launch a lawsuit that could cost them hundreds of millions. Arthur can help you find the right law firm. They will take the case on contingency. You will be a very wealthy man." I could feel the future branching in front of me, a life of wealth and vindication, a life where I could have anything I wanted. But the letter wasn't finished. "But I want you to think carefully, Leo. A lawsuit will take years. It will consume you, just as it consumed me. And in the end, you will have money. But money is just paper. This land, this way of life, it's something more. It's in your blood. Your father knew it. I know it. This farm is dying. But so are all the farms around it. Davies and Agricorp are bleeding them dry, one by one. My neighbors, good people I've known my whole life, are losing everything. Your father grew up with their kids. You would have too. There is another option. The ledger book in this box details a series of accounts. When it became clear I was dying, I forced a settlement. I used the threat of this evidence not to get rich, but to secure our flank. I made a deal with a third party, a competitor of Agricorp's, who was terrified of this information getting out. They paid for my silence. It wasn't the victory I wanted, but it was the one I could get for you in time. The money from that settlement is yours. It's clean. It's more than enough. You can take it and disappear. No one would blame you. You owe this place nothing. You owe these people nothing. He was giving me an out, an honorable discharge from a war I never signed up for. But then came the last paragraph. Or you can stay. You can use that money not for yourself, but for them. You can save this place. You can save these people. You can finish the work I started. It will be harder. You will trade a life of ease for a life of struggle. You will not be rich because you will pour every dime into the land and the community. Most people would call you a fool, but your grandmother, she would have called you a cutter. The choice is yours, Leo. Freedom from the past or ownership of the future. Whatever you choose, know that I am proud of you, and I love you. I closed my eyes, the letter resting in my lap. The weight of his love, his sacrifice, his hope. It was heavier than any amount of money. He hadn't just left me a choice between selling out and fighting back. He had left me a choice between two kinds of freedom, the freedom of escape or the freedom of purpose. For 12 years, all I had wanted was to escape the system, the pity, the feeling of being unwanted. But sitting here, in the heart of my grandfather's fortress, I realized escape was just another word for running. My whole life, I had been running. What if I stopped? What if I planted my feet in this soil and fought? What would that feel like? I opened the ledger. It was filled with my grandfather's precise script, account numbers, routing codes, access protocols for offshore banks. The final tally at the bottom of the page made me gasp. It was an impossible number. It was more money than I could comprehend. It was the kind of money that could buy anything. It was the kind of money that could build something. Or it was the kind of money that could ruin a person. And right about now, I know some of you are thinking about what you would do. It's easy to say you'd do the right thing when it's a hypothetical. But when the money is real, when the freedom is right there in your hands, the choice gets a lot harder. Have you ever been at a crossroads like that? Where the easy path is clear, but your heart is pulling you down the harder road? Let me know in the comments. I read them all, and I think it's important we talk about these moments. This community is a place for people who have faced those choices. Now, let's get back to the story. I had to make a decision, and I had until noon the next day. I didn't sleep. I spent the night in that cold house, walking from room to room with my phone's flashlight, the letters and the ledger on the kitchen table like a holy text. I was piecing together not just my grandfather's life, but my own. I saw the pencil marks on a door frame, measuring the height of a boy named Leo. I found a small carved wooden bird in a drawer in my old room, its wings worn smooth. I remembered him making it for me, his large, calloused hands so careful with the tiny piece of wood. The memories were coming back in flashes. The smell of sawdust, the rumble of the tractor, the warmth of the kitchen on a cold morning. This wasn't just a property, it was my home. A home I had been ripped from, but a home nonetheless. Morning came, painting the gray sky with pale strokes of pink and orange. I felt a strange calm settle over me. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't even a choice, not really. It was an inheritance. Not the money, the fight. The first call I made was to Arthur Abernathy. I woke him up. His voice was groggy, then sharp with concern. "Leo, are you all right? What did you decide?" "I'm not selling, Arthur," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I need your help. I'm keeping the farm, and I'm going to pay off the lien." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Son," he said slowly, "that's $247,000. Where are you going to get that kind of money?" "My grandfather left instructions," I said simply. "Can you meet me at the county bank at 10 a.m.? And can you call a town meeting? Or get the word out to as many of the local farmers as you can, the ones being squeezed by Agricorp. Tell them to be at the community hall at 11. Tell them it's important." "A town meeting? Leo, what are you planning?" he asked, a note of alarm in his voice. "I'm planning to finish what my grandfather started," I said. "Just trust me." To his credit, he did. He asked no more questions, just said he would make the calls. The next hour was a blur of activity. I used my phone to follow my grandfather's meticulous instructions, accessing the accounts, initiating the transfers. The numbers on the screen were abstract, unreal. It felt like playing a video game. But when I was done, a significant portion of my grandfather's legacy was sitting in a newly created account at the Prairie Ridge County Bank. I drove the old Ford back to town. It felt different now. It didn't feel like a loaner. It felt like mine. When I walked into Arthur's office, he was pacing, looking more worried than he had the day before. "The bank confirmed the wire transfer," he said, staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. "Leo, the sheer amount, where did this come from?" "A settlement," I said, handing him the steel box of evidence. "My grandfather's insurance policy. This is for you. It's the proof of Agricorp's patent infringement. I don't want to sue them. I don't want to spend my life in court. But I want them to know that we have it. I want you to hold it. It's our leverage. It's the reason they're going to leave this county alone." He looked at the box, then at me. A slow smile spread across his tired face. It was like watching the sun rise. "Thomas," he whispered, "you magnificent old goat." At the bank, the manager, a man whose face was pinched with perpetual skepticism, treated me like a curiosity. He had clearly been briefed by Arthur. The transaction to pay off the Agricorp lien was processed with a few quiet keystrokes. I was handed a receipt, just a slip of paper. But it was the deed to my freedom, my farm's freedom. After the bank, we walked to the community hall. It was a squat brick building next to the fire station. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. About 30 farmers were there, men and women, their faces etched with the same worry I saw in the landscape. They were weathered, beaten down, but their eyes were still proud. They looked at me, a kid in a hoodie and jeans, and I could see the doubt. I could see them wondering what this was all about. Another waste of their time. Arthur stood up. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "This is Leo Cutter, Thomas Cutter's grandson." A few murmurs went through the crowd. They knew the name. They knew the story, or the one they thought was the story. "As you know," Arthur continued, "the Cutter farm was set for foreclosure. As of an hour ago, that is no longer the case. The debt has been paid in full." A wave of shock rippled through the room. People looked at each other, then back at me. I stepped forward, my hands shaking. I wasn't a public speaker. I was just a kid who had spent his life trying to be invisible. But my grandfather's voice was in my head. "They will underestimate you." "My name is Leo," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again, louder this time. "My grandfather was Thomas Cutter. Most of you knew him. You probably thought he was a stubborn old fool who lost his farm. You might think the same of me. I looked around the room, meeting their eyes. Agricor is strangling this community. They're counting on us being too broke, too tired, and too alone to fight back. They offer deals that look like lifelines, but are actually nooses. My grandfather fought them for more than a decade. He fought them alone, and it cost him everything. It cost him his reputation. It cost him me. My voice cracked on that last word. I took a breath. But he never quit. And he left me the means to keep fighting, not just for his farm, but for all of us. I held up the receipt from the bank. This is just the beginning. I'm proposing we form a cooperative, a real one. We pool our resources, we share our equipment, and we bargain with suppliers as a single entity. We cut out the middlemen who are bleeding us dry. We own our debt, we own our equipment, we own our future. A man in the front row, his face like a dried apple, scoffed. That's a nice speech, kid, but co-ops take capital. Equipment costs money. We're all running on fumes here. What are we going to use? Your granddad's rusty old tractor? The room was silent. This was the moment they would either dismiss me or listen. Just then, the door at the back of the hall opened. Robert Davies walked in, flanked by two younger men in sharp suits. He was exactly as I'd pictured him. Sleek, confident, with the predatory smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. He ignored the farmers and walked straight to me. "Leo," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "I'm Robert Davies. I have an appointment with your lawyer at noon. I think we can wrap this up quickly. No need for all this drama." He gestured dismissively at the assembled farmers. "Arthur," I said, not taking my eyes off Davies. "What time is it?" Arthur checked his watch. 11:30. "Good," I said. I turned to face Davies. My heart was a drum against my ribs, but my voice was ice. "There's been a change of plans, Mr. Davies. I'm not selling." Davies' smile tightened. "I think you are. The alternative is you lose everything. Don't be a fool, son. Take the money." "The farm is no longer in foreclosure," I said calmly. "The lien was paid this morning." The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked genuinely stunned. He recovered quickly, his eyes narrowing. "You're bluffing. Where would a kid like you get that kind of money?" "My grandfather was a very resourceful man," I said. "He left a detailed account of your business practices, including the theft of his patents. I believe the term is industrial espionage. We have the proof, Mr. Davies. The original designs, the timelines, the shell corporations, everything." Now he was pale. The two suits behind him exchanged nervous glances. He had underestimated me. He had underestimated my grandfather. "What do you want?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. I smiled. It was my grandfather's smile, I think. "I want you to leave. I want you to tell Agricorp that Prairie Ridge is no longer open for business. We have the evidence to tie you up in court for the next 20 years. It would be a PR nightmare. Or you can cancel the outstanding debts for every farmer in this room, call it a loss, and walk away, quietly." He stared at me, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. He was beaten. He knew it. But I wasn't done. I turned back to the farmers. They were all on their feet, watching, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning hope. "The man in the front row was right," I said, my voice ringing through the hall. "A co-op needs equipment. We've been making do with old machinery for too long. It's inefficient. It's why our yields are down and our costs are up. We need to modernize. We need to compete." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had looked up earlier, the regional manager for John Deere. Yes, hello, I said into the phone, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. My name is Leo Cutter. I'm the new head of the Prairie Ridge Farmers Cooperative. I'd like to place an order for 12 of your new S780 combines, fully loaded. A gasp went through the room. 12 combines. That was millions of dollars. Davies looked like he was going to have a stroke. Yes, that's right, 12, I continued into the phone. And we'll be paying for them today, in cash. Please send the invoice to my lawyer, Arthur Abernathy. He'll arrange the wire transfer. I hung up. The silence in the hall was absolute. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting, the sound of hope being reborn. The man who had scoffed at me was staring, his mouth hanging open. Davies looked at me, then at the faces of the farmers. He saw their expressions change from beaten down despair to fierce, unified defiance. He had lost. He had lost more than just a land deal. He had lost control. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the hall, his 2 suits trailing behind him like defeated dogs. The moment the door closed, the room erupted, not in cheers, but in a low, rumbling wave of conversation, of questions, of disbelief turning into belief. People were clapping me on the back, shaking my hand. The old farmer who had doubted me came up, his eyes wet. "Thomas would be proud, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He'd be so damn proud." I just nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. I looked over at Arthur. He was leaning against a wall, watching the scene, that slow smile on his face again. He caught my eye and gave me a single, approving nod. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. There would be years of hard work ahead. Rebuilding the farm, organizing the co-op, learning 1,000 things I didn't know about agriculture and business. It was a monumental task. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. I had a home. I had a purpose. I had a community. I walked out of the hall and into the cold, bright air. I looked down the main street of Prairie Ridge. It didn't look like a dying town anymore. It looked like a town that was about to be reborn. My grandfather had given me 2 inheritances. The first was the money, the weapon he had forged in secret. The second, and more important, was the chance to build something that lasts. A legacy not of wealth, but of resilience. A home. And that's a choice we all face in some way, isn't it? When we're faced with the wreckage of the past, do we take the insurance money and walk away? Or do we pick up a hammer and start to rebuild? There's no right answer for everyone. But for me, standing there in that cold prairie wind, I knew I had made the right choice. I was home. This story is about a farm, but it could be about a family, a relationship, or a dream that seems lost. It's about finding out that the story you were told about your past wasn't the true one. And it's about the strength it takes to write a new ending. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own piece of ground, I hope you'll subscribe and become part of this community. Share your story in the comments below. Tell me about a time you chose the harder road, or a time you discovered a truth that changed everything. Your story matters, and by sharing it, we remind each other that no one has to fight alone. Thank you for listening.